Coasts and islands, listen to me. Distant peoples, pay attention. The Lord called me before I was born. He named me while I was in my mother's womb. And you know what? That means he called me before I was ever born. And he's also called you before you were ever born. If you don't believe that, guess what? Chapter 49, verse 1 of Isaiah is what I just read to you. And in verse 7, it says this: kings will see, princes will stand up, and they will all bow down because of the Lord, who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel, and he has chosen you. Welcome to another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Today we're going through Isaiah chapter 49 to 53, and tomorrow we're going to go through Isaiah chapter 54 all the way to 58. So I hope that's has touched you. We just did 49, so we're going to move on into chapter 50 of Isaiah. And here we go. So one thing that stood out to me about chapter 50 was verse 7, and to me this talks about determination, okay? Verse 7, it says, "The Lord God will help me, therefore I have not been humiliated. Therefore I have set my face like flint. Therefore I have set my face like flint." That means I'm determined. I'm stone, rock solid, ready to go. I'm determined. And it says, and I know I will not be put to shame. That's confidence and that's determination. Now, when I think about that statement, therefore I have set my face like a flint, in Isaiah chapter 50, verse 7, I think about Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States. And he was in a special session when he gave a message to Congress at the very beginning of the Civil War. And he concluded this. He says, "Having thus chosen our course without guile and with pure purpose, let us renew our trust in God and go forward without fear and with manly hearts." You see, without fear, with confidence, and with determination when he says manly hearts. I found that just to be so appropriate when it talks about being an obedient servant here in chapter 50 and how we go about doing it. Confidence and being determined are key efforts in this. Now, move on to chapter 51 of Isaiah, and it's talking about salvation. But verse 9 and 10 stood out the most to me. Wake up, arm of the Lord, clothe yourself with strength. Remember that, arm of the Lord. Arm of the Lord, clothe yourself with strength. Wake up, as in days past, as in generations long ago. Wasn't it you who hacked Rahab to pieces, who pierced the sea monster? Wasn't it you who dried up the sea with the waters of the great deep, who made the seabed into a road for the redeemed to pass over? Wow, what does all that mean? What does all that mean? Well, God is encouraged here to wake up from his slumber and to go about his redemptive work. And we read about that in Psalm 44, verse 23, and also Psalm 78, verse 65. Past victories are then recounted in the form of the defeat of Rahab, you see here, and also a sea monster. And we read about a sea monster before, didn't we? Yep, Isaiah chapter 30, verse 7. How about Job? When we're reading Job chapter 26, verse 12, he was there. And also in Psalm 89, verse 10, it was there. Rahab in other texts clearly stands for Egypt, but here we have a poetic allusion to God's victory over the Egyptians at the time of the Exodus. God, after all, dried up the seabed, as was mentioned here, and made it a road at the Red Sea. Remember when those waters of the Red Sea were parted? As we read through that story in Exodus chapter 14 and 15. Well, God's past deliverance of his people from Egyptian bondage bodes well for their future deliverance from Babylonian captivity. So there we are with what stood out in chapter 51. Now 52, on the other hand, we're going to get into chapter 52, but the first thing that stood out is kind of what stood out in 51. Wake up! 52 verse 1, wake up, wake up! The beginning of verse 2, stand up, shake the dust off of yourself. When I think of standing up and shaking the dust off of yourself, the first thing I think about is that story of the donkey. This donkey had fallen down into a well, and all the townspeople couldn't figure out how to get him out. They tried to loop him with a rope and pull him out, but they just weren't strong enough to lift his weight. And they didn't have any other choice. They're like, well, we're just going to bury this donkey in this well. So they just start throwing dirt over in the well to bury the donkey, because that's what you do with things that are going to die. You just bury them. So as the dirt starts flying into the well and goes down to the bottom of the well, it's hitting the donkey in the back. And what happens? The donkey shakes all that dirt off and he steps up on it. And as they continue, every time that dirt would fly down and land on the donkey's back, he would just shake it up and step up, shake it off and step up, shake it off and step up, over and over and over again, until finally they had put so much dirt in the well that the donkey was at the top of the well and he walked out. That's the kind of determination that we're talking about here. Stand up, shake the dust off of yourself, and let's get moving, people. And then when I get to verse 10, it says, the Lord has displayed his holy arm. Did you catch that one again? His holy arm in the sight of all the nations. All the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. Now I'm going to read that to you again in the New King James translation of this, chapter 52, verse 10. It says, the Lord has made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of God. When I read that, the first thing I think about is the Boston Tea Party. And you're thinking, what? What in the world are you talking about, preacher husband? Well, I'm going to tell you, it does make me think of the Boston Tea Party, and there is a very important reason why it makes me think about the Boston Tea Party. You see, here's your history lesson for the day, and your American history lesson, as I do. The Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Act of 1767, they had angered American colonists to the point that they just hated the British. They considered these taxes to be intolerable because they were not represented in Westminster Parliament. So in March in 1770, the crisis culminated in the death of 5 American colonists who were killed by British soldiers who were commandeering homes. I'm assuming that means people weren't going to pay these taxes. They refused, so the British came in. They start taking away their stuff because they wouldn't pay. Well, in early 1773, the men of Marlborough, Massachusetts declared unanimously this statement right here. Death is more eligible than slavery. A freeborn people are not required by the religion of Jesus Christ to submit to tyranny, but may make use of such power as God has given them to recover and support their laws and liberties. We implore the ruler above the skies that he would make bare his arm. You hear that? That he would make bare his arm in defense of his church and people and let Israel go. And then on December the 16th, 1773, the Sons of Liberty, a band of Boston patriots, threw a cargo of 342 chests of tea from a British East India Trading Company ship into the Boston harbor. The British government responded by closing the port of Boston, enacting other laws that were known as the Intolerable Acts, and charging John Hancock, Samuel Adams, Joseph Warren, and even Benjamin Church with the crime of high treason. At the very least, the Boston Tea Party rallied the support of revolutionaries in the 13 colonies, and it sparked the American Revolution. See, that is pretty important, don't you think? So that's why it reminds me so much of the Boston Tea Party. The Lord has displayed his holy arm in the sight of all the nations. Now what I'm going to do next is a little different than what I normally do. And this is for the last chapter, for chapter 53. This, verses 1 through 9, is absolutely images of Jesus. So sit back and just listen as I read through verses 1 through 9. And just imagine Jesus when I'm reading this. Who has believed what we have heard, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a young plant and like a root out of dry ground. He didn't have an impressive form or majesty, that we should look at him, no appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of suffering, who knew what sickness was. He was like someone people turned away from. He was despised, and we did not value him. Yet he himself bore our sickness, and he carried our pains. But we in turn regarded him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. You see, we didn't have the right opinion there, did we? This is actually quoted in Matthew chapter 8, verse 17, if you want to look it up in the New Testament. Verse 5, but he was pierced because of our rebellion. Pierced, crushed because of our iniquities. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds. We all went astray like sheep. We all have turned our own way. And the Lord has punished him for the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep silent before her shearers, he did not open his mouth. Now, in this verse 7, though not suffering for his own sins, the servant suffered silently. Jesus suffered silently and willingly. He didn't say anything when they asked him about being guilty. Philip, he used this passage to tell the Ethiopian eunuch the good news about Jesus and how he silently bore his crucifixion. This in Acts chapter 8, verses 31 through 35, and also in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 22 and 23. We'll continue on in verse 8. He was taken away because of oppression and judgment, and who considered his fate? For he was cut off from the land of the living. In other words, Jesus was killed. This is his death. He was struck because of my people's rebellion. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, but he was with a rich man at his death. What? Because he had done no violence and had not spoken deceitfully. What does it mean that he was with a rich man at his death? Well, the pairing of this wicked with the rich man implies that the wealthy man got his riches by deceit. Jesus himself, though, was literally buried beside a rich man when he was placed in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And you can read about that in Matthew chapter 27, verses 57 through 60. Now, I hope this has touched you. If it has, please click the like button, the subscribe button, the follow button. Give me a rumble on Rumble. Click that little punching bag, the little boxing glove there. Give me a rumble. And also click that notification bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow for another episode of The Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. We'll see you then.